Hi, friends. So I wanted to sort of pass some of this essay that I saw. It's called Stop Mocking Vegans, and it's from, I think, on the New York Times, and it's by Fahad Manjoo, who's an opinion columnist, and he's not a vegan, which is interesting because he seems to be defending it, and there's some interesting points in it, and there are some problematic points in it, and I wanted to talk about both. So please stick with me. So he starts off, they're right about ethics and the environment. If you won't join them, at least respect their effort to build a sustainable future. When Popeyes' new fried chicken sandwich went viral for its deliciousness last week, I did not pause, not even for a second, to consider the vast toll of suffering and environmental destruction inherent in its rise. I'm guessing you didn't either. Indeed, I can already feel your eyes rolling deep into your head at the mere suggestion that there's anything to feel guilty about regarding the sold-out sandwich. So before we go on, let me warn you, the rest of this column is going to give your eye-rolling muscles a very good workout. That's funny. You want to shake me? Shut up, Killjoy. Haven't I heard how unspeakably delicious this sandwich is? As the New Yorker proclaimed, quote, "The Popeyes chicken sandwich is here to save America," end quote. So why spoil this one last true thing by mentioning the squalid, overcrowded, constantly lit, 40-day lifespan of the typical factory farm fast food chicken? And let's just pause for a moment and just remember that any animal that's raised for food, no matter how nicely we think they've been treated, they usually have had their young taken from them. They've been castrated and whatever else. They've without anesthetic. And when they're not productive anymore, they are killed. That's how it goes. No matter if it's what we think are happy animals on happy farms, which is a complete myth, or whether it's this industrialized farming, which they call factory farming, but even free range is factory farming. If you put in quotes, it's industrialized, the whole lot of it. A lot of these labels are really, they're just very, very large warehouses with crammed with a little bit more space, but so what? It'd be considered torture if you applied these so-called humane standards to people, to humans. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there, this factory farm thing, as if when factory farming ends, everything's just going to be hunky-dory. But also factory farming is never going to end. The reason factory farming exists is because it's trying to keep up with demand for animal products. So the only way really to end factory farming, and this is something you don't hear, sadly, is the only way to end it is for people to go vegan, because it's really all about demand and supply. The factory farming is the economically efficient way of raising animals, breeding them into existence, and it's torturous, and in the end they're killed. And these so-called free range and enriched cages and all that sort of thing, all these animals end up in the same slaughterhouse or dumped in dumpsters or whatever. Anyway, so that's that little part there. So he goes on, he says, or for that matter, the irony of the sandwich going viral at the same time as heartbreaking pictures of the Amazon rainforest on fire. Many of us, myself included, engaged in painless performative environmentalism. We'll give up plastic straws and tweet passionately that someone should do something about the Amazon, yet few of us make space in our worldview to acknowledge the carcass in the room, the irrefutable evidence that our addiction to meat is killing the planet right before our eyes. Well, our addiction to animal products is killing the planet, and of course killing 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals every year. So it's destroying the oceans, it's destroying the Amazon rainforest, because cow ranching is the greatest driver of deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. So if we were vegan, the Amazon rainforest would not be being burnt at now 2.5 acres a minute instead of 1 acre a minute, which it was for years and years and years. It's been burning for years and years due to making room for cows, and also for soy to feed cows and feedlots all over the world and feed other animals all over the world. So, it's not just a sudden thing. This has been going on for a very long time. I've been talking about it for a long time. Okay, so he's pointed out about the Amazon. After all, it takes only a few minutes of investigation to learn that there is one overwhelming reason the Amazon is burning: to clear ground for for cattle ranching and for the cultivation of soy, the vast majority of which goes not into tofu, but into animal feed, including fast food chicken. Okay, so that's a good point. That's a good point that he made there. Well done. So I'll just post those two memes that I always post, and that's where you'll probably get some more eye rolling for anybody who's tired of me talking about this issue. But the largest study to date, 119 countries, 40,000 farms from farm to fork, 90% of all the products we eat, and this is the largest research to date study published in the Science Journal, and it said that a vegan diet is the single most important thing one can do to address not only the climate crisis, but eutrophication, acidification, all that. It's better than driving electric cars and all that kind of thing. So that's the latest science. Okay, so if we pretend that's not happening, if we ignore that science, we're science deniers. Okay, so he goes on. As I say, I did not consider any of this because I don't regularly come into contact with a lot of preachy vegans. That's a typical thing that people like to say about vegans. They're preachy. That's interesting. Anyway, so indeed, preachy vegans is something of a myth. There's an old joke. I've talked about this in another video. There's an old joke, quote, "How do you know when you're talking to a vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you," end quote. That is as untrue as it is revealing about the teller. And that's so true. Although vegans can marshal strongest evidence to support their claims and adherents of many other belief systems, and by the way, veganism isn't a belief system. It's just simply an ethical position, just like any other ethical position, whether it's being against racism, heterosexism, misogyny, and so forth. So it's not a belief system. That's something that's incorrectly described there. And it was coined by Donald Watson in 1944. Okay, so the name vegan was coined by Donald Watson. So many other belief systems, whether of other diets or major religions. And that's the other problem. Veganism isn't a diet, and it's not a belief system. It's an ethical position which rejects using animals for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons. And that it rejects the property status of animals. It recognizes their sentience and their moral personhood. And moral personhood simply means we don't see them as a thing. And they're not a thing because they're sentient, and that's science-based too. So even aquatic animals are sentient as well. And there's no levels of sentience. The dog whom we love, the cat whom we love, their sentience is exactly the same as the sentience of all these 1 trillion land and aquatic animals that we torture and kill every year for trivial reasons and mostly palate pleasure, since we don't need animal products at all to survive, and we can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. Okay, so here we go on. So other diets or major religions, they get little respect, and their ideas rarely receive mass media acknowledgement other than mockery. That's true, but I think that's improving. It depends really. If you're focusing on mainstream media, that's probably definitely true. But there are millions of vegans now in the world, and there's just so many people. I could not possibly even venture to cook all the different vegan recipes that there are. There must be millions now, and they're fantastic. I mean, I sort of, sometimes I get in a little bit of a rut and with something because I might be busy or whatever, and then I look online and I think, wow, I really should, I should be, so I'll try another recipe or try something, and I try to expand, and there's just so much you can do with plants. So much that's delicious, and it's so healthy for you, and it's just fantastic. So, I mean, I made a cake the other day, and it was so great, I have to say. Not patting myself on the back, but it was so excellent. Anyway, so, that you can make all sorts of cakes and desserts and, really, really naughty things if you want to, in that regard. And but there's also just so many different ethnic dishes you can make. It's just endless, really. It's just absolutely endless. The variety and the flavors and all of that. So anybody who thinks that a plant-based diet is like rabbit food or something, they are they obviously they're not on the net if they think that, truly. Okay, so he says, and then he goes and he qualifies about himself. I'm not vegan, I'm barely failingly a vegetarian pescatarian. I make an effort to avoid, and by the way, vegetarianism still involves it still involves using dairy, eggs, and wearing animal products and so forth. So it's actually very problematic. It's a really problematic thing to do. It's just non-vegan. It's not. If we want to basically seriously regard the sentience of other animals, then we have to be vegan, because we still wear animal products and they're products of violence. Dairy is still destroying forests, and taking young away from their mothers, and the mothers are crying and grieving for days. Billions of male calves are killed every year because they're no use to the dairy industry. The egg industry is horrific, with billions of chickens being thrown alive into grinders every year because they're male chickens, because they're no use to the dairy industry. It goes on and on. So, we have to be vegan if we truly believe in rejecting animal use, then we must be vegan. Okay, so he says, I'm not vegan, I'm barely failingly vegetarian pescatarian. I make an effort to avoid meat, but for reasons of convenience and shameless hedonism, still end up eating several times a month, especially fish. My purpose here, this is the other thing, people think that eating fish, like somehow fish isn't sentient. Fish aren't sentient. They are. And they also, some people think they're some sort of vegetable, or they're not an animal. I mean, seriously, truly? Or that it's fine that they're all swimming around in the ocean and, so they're free and they're not in cages, and that makes it fine. No, not really. In some ways, it's just as bad. It's like when you see these, it's free range pork. What is better than, what is better about sort of the things that we do to an animal on a farm, and then we end up killing them in the same slaughterhouse and stuff, and we still, because they're of no benefit. I'm taking away their life. Death is a harm. Taking away life is a harm. And as I said, all sorts of awful things happen on these so-called mom-and-pop farms. Anyway, so, and watch Seaspiracy. This Seaspiracy has got a great Instagram account. Check that out, because the horrors that go on, that we're doing to the oceans, it's absolutely unbelievable. And I don't know why anybody would think that eating fish is a good idea. Eating aquatic animals is a good idea. Somehow, that's somehow better than not eating land, domestic animals, and so forth. Okay, so I make an effort to avoid meat, but for reasons of, as he said that. My purpose here is not to change how you eat, dress, or think about the ethics of consuming something like Popeyes sandwich. This is interesting. I'm not sure. I mean, he's written a whole essay about this, but he's not trying to change people's way of thinking. But anyway, okay. Instead, as a fellow omnivore and a person, now, actually, humans are really robust frugivores. If you've seen a dog's dentition, they actually have very, very different dentition to us, and they're omnivores. We have molars for crushing plant material. We have long intestines for digesting plant material. Dogs have short intestines. Cats have short intestines. The idea that we're really omnivores it's a big stretch. Really, it's a stretch, because we still have to cook meat and so forth. It's really not a good idea to be eating flesh like dogs do, and cats do, and so forth. Cats are obligate carnivores. Anyway, I've read an interesting essay by a vet about cats, and how as long as you have the ingredients in a cat's nutrition, in the cat's diet, vet-approved ingredients, taurine and all of that, really doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it's from an animal or from plants, as long as they want to eat it and they enjoy it and it's healthy for them and it's balanced nutritionally for them, then really does it matter. So that's something to think about, because at some point somebody's going to make, there is vegan cat food, or should I say plant-based cat food, because vegan is an ethical position, but there is plant-based cat food, but I find it fairly limited, and but one day there'll be a huge broad range of all kinds of plant-based cat food. And I've talked about the domestication of cats, and I'm not going to get into that here. So anyway, but I just thought I'd throw that in there. Okay, so I get a little bit sidetracked. Sorry, I meander a little bit. So instead, as a fellow omnivore and a person concerned about the planet's future, I want to ask you to do something much more simple, to alter how you think about vegans. Well, that would be nice. I'd rather people, rather than alter the way they think about me and other vegans, I would rather them just go vegan, really. It matters not to me whether, if you hate my guts because I'm of my very existence causing some cognitive dissonance, that's your problem. I'm sorry that might be happening for you, but also I'm happy if that causes cognitive dissonance, because it should, because we should all be feeling that way, because we know deep down what we're doing to other animals is wrong. We just don't want to think about it. That's why all these slaughterhouses are way out in the sticks. One of the reasons they're way out in the sticks. Also, most people don't want to hear about it all. They don't want to see it. There's all sorts of age restrictions on any videos of slaughterhouses or anything else. the animal industry is trying to make felons out of anybody who reveals anything about about what they're doing, and so forth. It's a sort of a, we don't want to know, we just want to see them all neatly packaged on the shelf, the animal products, so that we don't have to think about what we're participating in. Okay, so so he goes on to say, I want to urge you to give vegans a chance to love and to celebrate them instead of ridiculing them. We need more vegan voices because on the big issues, the criminal cruelty of industrial farming, sentience and emotional depth of food animals, the environmental toll of meat. I don't know why people always just talk about meat, because dairy is also a problem, and other animal products are a problem, and fish and other aquatic animals that we catch. It's a dreadful devastation. And it also affects the environment. It also dramatically increases and affects the climate emergency. And it's also, we're going to have no fish in the oceans by 2048, according to scientists. There's hundreds of thousands of, mammals that we fetishize, like dolphins and whales, are killed every year in drifting fishing nets and so forth. And there's bycatch. The bycatch is like 4 pounds out of 5 that are caught on these gigantic trawlers, and there's 4 million of them in the ocean. They are throwing 4 pounds of the 5 overboard, and they are all sorts of animals, turtles and all kinds of things. And even though they claim that they have these sort of people overseeing this, it's a nonsense. And I think that will all be exposed in that Seaspiracy, but you can see it on Instagram, instagram.com/Seaspiracy. Okay, so, and the unsustainability of its global rise. Vegans are irrefutably on the right side of history. Well, thank you very much. They are the vanguard. Well, thank you very much. Climate scholars say that if we are ever to survive a warming planet, people will have to consume far fewer animals than we do now. Now, see, that's a really unfortunate position, because even if, now, just putting the ethical position aside, that it doesn't matter if it's 1 animal or 100,000 animals, they're sentient, so we don't have the right to use them, okay? But even if this whole idea of cutting back, imagine if 7 billion or even 10 billion people at 2050, the population expected on the planet, imagine if everybody just cut back a little bit. There'd still be billions and billions and billions of animals. And by the way, if you've ever seen that Chris Hedges on Contact, where he talks about the looming food crisis, basically animal agriculture will not feed the planet by 2050. It will not. And if you've seen those memes, I'm going to show the one again of how much land is left when animal agriculture would stop, how much land would be left, and even without that land that would be left, we'd still be able to feed the planet with a plant-based diet. There's no question that animal agriculture is ridiculous. It's violence. It's absolutely unnecessary, particularly when I've said we don't need animal products at all to survive. I've been vegan for 15 years, coming up on 15 years. I've never been healthier. We don't need it, so we're just doing this awful thing and destroying the planet, and it's responsible for this, majorly responsible for the 6th mass extinction. It's the major driver of the climate emergency, and we're doing this for a few moments of palate pleasure, and it's actually destroying our health on top of it in the amounts we eat them. And it turns out being child abuse, because children now have literally, when children have died prematurely and they've been in the morgue, they've discovered that these children have the beginnings of atherosclerosis, which is due to cholesterol in animal products. There's also, children are getting diabetes because the animal fat causes insulin resistance, and that is the major factor in diabetes. That's something you don't hear about, because if you've seen the film What the Health, which is made by the same people that made Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret, and you should check that out. And I think they're the same people that have made Seaspiracy. If you check out What the Health, it shows how many of these diabetes associations and so forth are getting funding from animal industry. And so they don't like to discount, they don't like to leave off animal products from their meal suggestions. And these products are the same products that are causing insulin resistance in children and adults. And in the United States, I think it's got some ridiculous figure like 1 in 3 people are going to have diabetes. It's a disastrous thing to get. Anyway, so, check out that What the Health. You can find it at whatthehealthfilm.com. And that's a documentary as well. Okay. Climate scholars say that if we are to survive a warming planet, people will have to consume far fewer animals than we do now. Well, I've just said how this far fewer, eat less meat, meat-free Mondays, flexitarianism is just all, it's all just faddish and a nonsense. We should just go vegan and be done with it, right? It's not difficult, it's not elitist, it's not hard, it's not any of those things. It's actually elitist at this point to continue consuming animal products. It is elitist because we're destroying the planet, we're destroying the lives of millions of trillions of sentient animals, we're causing a climate emergency, we are causing climate refugees. Bangladesh is going to be underwater. There are 160 million people there. India has made a fence around there. They say it's to keep drugs out or whatever, but really it's probably to stop Bangladeshis from coming across when their land goes underwater. It's causing world hunger because it takes 7 pounds of plant material to make 1 pound of beef. And so there's a lot of poor countries growing a lot of grain and sending it over to these feedlots to feed animals. There's poor countries that they're actually malnutrition, and they're sending their grain to Western countries. You know, we have a lot to answer for in the West. Imperialism and all this sort of our decadent lifestyles, which are destroying the planet, we're doing a lot worse than a lot of these poorer countries. Hey, so, you know, it's elitist to continue consuming animal products, to continue not to be vegan. That is elitist. We need to get our head around that. It's not elitist to be vegan. You don't need to buy pre-made products either. I don't hardly ever buy pre-made products. And a lot of it is vegan junk food anyway. I don't need that in my system. We can have delicious food, and it's really easy to make. It's affordable. Poorer countries used to have a plant-based diet, you know, before the West came in and started introducing animal products to a lot of them. And, you know, it was cheap. Beans are cheap. There's all sorts of things, you know, you can do with beans and other, you know, so we'll all have to become a little more vegan. Okay, so that's a problem in that a little more vegan, you can't be a little more anti-racist. You're either anti-racist and working on that, or you're not. So saying a little more vegan, it's an ethical position. So when you adopt an ethical position, you're either against something or you're not, and therefore you're sort of ambivalent and whatever. So if you're vegan, it's an ethical position. It's not a diet. It's presented so much like it's some sort of diet and health kick and all that kind of thing, but it's not. It's an ethical position. That's what the founder, Donald Watson, that's why he coined that term. It wasn't so that we could get on some sort of health kick. Okay, so he says we all have to become a little more vegan, and if we are to succeed in that, if we have to start by saluting vegans, we'll have to start by saluting vegans and not mocking them. Well, as I said, ethical vegans don't want anybody to be saluting us or, you know, and thinking we're great or anything. We're not. I mean, it's as somebody said once, it's the minimum standard of decency being vegan. It's the least we can do. It's for the same reasons that we're not a cannibal, basically. You know, I'm not a cannibal for the same reasons that I'm vegan. It's like, it's a minimum standard of decency, really. So we don't need anybody patting us on the back and saying, oh, I really admire you. Actually, that drives me a little bit spare when people say that. Because I don't want admiration, and it's not an admirable thing to be vegan. It's the minimum standard of decency. So I really hope, I would rather people, rather than doing any admiring or whatever, to just go vegan, really. Sorry, sometimes I get a little bit ranty about this because things are so desperate now. You know, it's not just, it's an moral imperative on so many levels now, so many reasons now. And even if you don't care about other sentient animals, you should be caring about your own lives, because it's basically imminent extinction is on the horizon. And if animal agriculture is the major driver of the climate emergency, then what are we doing? Why are we wringing our hands about the fossil fuel industry and all of that? And yes, that's awful. And the military, and they're a great polluter too. But they're not going to come to a screeching halt, and you're not going to make them come to a screeching halt. We can do what we can, and politicians aren't going to do anything, really. Really, they're not, because they're beholden to corporations in the military-industrial complex. So who can do something? We can. We can go vegan. We don't need permission from any government. We don't need permission from our families. We don't need permission from corporations or anything. We can go vegan right now. So this either-or thing, it doesn't have to be either-or. You can still be involved in non-violent civil disobedience, and you can be vegan. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. So none of these excuses about, oh, you know, no, we must end capitalism, we must end this and that, we must end the military-industrial complex, and then we can think about, no, we need to go vegan now, and we can do all those things. We can do all those things. Let's stop making silly excuses. I mean, really. We are nowhere close to that now. In the media, the pop culture, and even progressive, enlightened, polite society, it is still widely acceptable to make fun of vegans. I don't find that so much now. I find because there's so many vegans around now, and because also, not that I'm into celebrities being vegans, because usually they're wishy-washy and they're not really vegan. But I mean, a lot of people are sort of, it's become a lot more acceptable, and even businesses now, even Forbes has been promoting this idea that that corporations are really silly if they don't start embracing the vegan clientele, basically. That's what corporations are saying. They're actually urging businesses to do that, and you see more and more, vegan products. And as I say, we don't need to eat these pre-made vegan products, but I'm just saying, capitalism, they're only interested in its demand and supply. If the more vegans there are, the more they will supply to that. And if everybody became vegan, well, they'd just switch to plant-based products. They wouldn't be, they would just, there's even these large, awful animal industry like Tyson's have diversified, and now they're doing these they're doing sort of a vegan line of some kind, a plant-based thing, from what I understand. Large animal industry businesses, that Tyson's does all the huge exploitation of pigs. They're actually have some sort of, they've decided that this whole plant-based thing is taking off. You see, that's capitalism for you, demand and supply. We create the demand, they supply. Okay, so in the media, in pop culture, and even progressive, enlightened, polite society, it's still widely acceptable to make fun of vegans. The stereotype of the smug, self-satisfied, annoying vegan has taken deep cultural root. One survey found that vegans are viewed more negatively than atheists and immigrants, and are only slightly more tolerated than drug addicts. That's interesting. So I'm only a little bit more tolerable than somebody who has a substance abuse problem. That's interesting. But anyway, I don't know. I'm not sure about this, but anyway. It's true that America's food industry has recently begun investing heavily in animal-free milks and meats. Supermarkets are brimming with bounties of meat alternatives. Burger King is selling an Impossible Whopper, and KFC just announced fake fried chicken wings and nuggets. This is all great news for the planet, yet no one thanks vegans for creating a market for these alternatives. I don't really want to be thanked for pretend animal products. I'm not a fan of eating products that taste like the flesh of some animal who was who was killed. I'm really not that interested in it. But if that, I think it's, for some people, it's a good transition food. As I said, there's so many things you can do with animal products. There's so many things you can do with plants. And what I was happy to see, though, is that there's this thing called Just Eggs, which is made from mung beans and apparently tastes exactly like eggs. And that's being embraced by companies that recognize, that people want a plant-based diet, and they don't want to ingest huge amounts of alcohol, huge amounts of cholesterol, which apparently eating one egg is apparently equivalent to smoking 4 cigarettes, according to some research, and you can find that on whatthehealth.film.com. Mung beans, and apparently it tastes just like eggs, and so, they're sort of starting to make things out of that. Well, if that means that there's a lot more, I would prefer people just go vegan, and I prefer people just bypass the fake animal products, but whatever, I can deal with that, as long as people go vegan and hurry up, but anyway, So this is all great news for the planet, yet no thanks, vegans, for creating market for these alternatives. Not even the meat alternative startups themselves, which call themselves, quote, plant-based, end quote, and strictly avoid the V word, perhaps because food industry surveys find that, quote unquote, vegan is the least appealing label that can be applied to food, worse than diet and sugar-free. My goodness. And yet it's so yummy. Have a look on Instagram and see all the images of yummy vegan food. I mean, really and truly. There are many things that have gotten better in the 5 years that I've been vegan. This is quote. There are many things that have gotten better in the 5 years that I've been vegan, like the availability of options or the quality of vegan cheese. But the attitude that omnivores have about vegans doesn't feel like it's changed that much at all. Much, if at all, end quote. Summer Ann Burton, the editor of the new vegan focus magazine called Tenderly, told me, quote, even people who are really radical and progressive in lots of areas of their lives still seem really suspicious, frustrated, and annoyed by the idea of someone being vegan, end quote. That's interesting. I don't know. I don't find people are annoyed at all. And maybe this is an American thing. I don't know. Maybe that's how it is in the United States. I know that there are people online that on social media, but I tend to just, if somebody's really carrying on and performing, I just ignore it really at this point, because it's really taken off. It is the future. Being vegan is the future, really. So anybody who's kicking and screaming and carrying on, eventually they'll see that all this fuss and carrying on was really silly, really silly. We could have done this a lot earlier, really and truly. Anyway, the annoyance, but we're deeply speciesist. We're indoctrinated right from the start, and we're deeply speciesist, and this is why we are all like we are, and why it's such a shock when it clicks to us. What am I doing? Like in 2005, I read something about the dairy industry, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is totally unacceptable. This is like awful. And this is just normal runnings of the dairy industry. And I thought, if that's what the dairy industry is like, I bet you there are other industries like this, and sure, And then I realized, of course, that not only all these industries, their idea of humane, if applied to humans, would be considered torture, but I realized that it wouldn't matter how nice the animals are treated. It's just wrong. We shouldn't be doing it, and we don't need to do it. And that's what makes it even worse. We're doing it just because we can. It's like a human supremacist thing. And this is what we do with imperialism. We subjugate and we dominate and we oppress different groups in different countries because we can. I mean, we've got to stop that. And this sort of fear of diversity and hatred of diversity and trying to, all this kind of thing. Anyway, so the annoyance manifests in all different ways. Ms. Burton will post an inoffensive vegan recipe and someone will invariably reply, quote, "That would be better with bacon," end quote. Yes, we know that the knuckle-dragging people, no offense to other primates, the knuckle draggers that have to post bacon, but I haven't seen that for a long time. I think they realize that it's a losing battle now. But vegans are constantly tarred with the suggestion that they are unfun. They're asked whether oral sex is vegan, or accused of ruining weddings and birthday dinners and their outlandish preferences. Quote, "Being vegan," or talking about your reasons for being vegan, is taken to mean you are judgmental and smug. "You must be fun at parties," end quote, is probably the thing that I hear most often, end quote, Ms. Burton said. Wow, that's, I don't know, that friend doesn't sound very nice. Anyways, the tragedy, or that person, whoever that said that to her, anyway, the tragedy here is the mockery intimidates vegans. Not really. I don't know any vegan that. It's just really annoying and sad, because you're trying to get you're trying to get across a sort of a message to someone, and they're just saying silly things, and it's time wasting. Anyway, rather than being out and proud about their beliefs, and see, it's not a belief, and I don't believe about being out and proud. This is, like I said, it's a minimum standard of decency. Would I be out and proud if I wasn't eating humans and I wasn't a cannibal? Would I be going around, "Oh, I don't eat humans. I don't eat them. And you shouldn't eat them too." I mean, like, what's to be proud about? And so, anyway, I don't know. I don't understand this whole sort of proud to be this and that. It's just, as a friend said, it's a minimum standard of decency. Rather than being out and proud about their beliefs, vegans find themselves biting their tongues. No, I don't really. But you don't sort of suddenly start talking about veganism at a table, at a dinner, when everybody is eating animal products. There are times where you don't talk about things. And you pick and choose, you pick and choose your times. Otherwise, it's just about being skillful. What's the point in talking about, mentioning veganism? And you also, people have to show some interest too in it. And also, you try and sort of, there are ways you can start talking about it. But I find that my very presence, just the fact that you are vegan, is enough that makes people think too. But, I look for opportunities online to talk about veganism with people, because there's a whole world of online stuff that you can talk about veganism, and of course I do these videos, and I do them on other pages as well on social media. So I do what I can, and in real life I look for opportunities, and people are interested. That's what I find. People are interested in this issue. A lot of us overcorrect, Ms. Burton said. Quote, "You make a sacrifice because of your beliefs, and when people ask you about it, you're afraid to sound judgmental or smug, so you brush it off," end quote. Well, I don't know. there's no sacrifice. I don't find it's a sacrifice, and it's not a belief, as I've talked about. And, if people think you're being judgmental and smug simply for being vegan, or if they think you're being judgmental and smug because if they show some interest and you talk about it, or you mention it in something in an appropriate place, or you're talking about it online, that's that person's problem. They're having the cognitive dissonance, and they want you to shut up about it because it's making them uncomfortable, because they're doing something, they know there's something wrong with it. There's something problematic about it. So that's their problem. If somebody gets uncomfortable about something that I'm posting online, I just think, well, that's good. It's better than indifference. If they try to take up my time with nonsense, though, I don't have any time for that. Anyway, so there are many theories for why vegans have it so rough. But the one, I don't know. Anyway, but the one I lean on is guilt and cognitive dissonance. Many omnivores understand the toll that meat wreaks on the planet. It's just not meat. I don't know why people just focus on meat all the time. It's all animal products. Dairy, eggs and all of that. The aquatic animals. Anyway, wreaks on the planet, and we can't help but feel the tension between loving animals, whatever that means, in the abstract while eating them with abandon on the plate. All this creates feelings of defensiveness, so when a vegan comes along, their very presence seems like an affront. Well, that's true. I think that is true for many people, and some people would rather you not see you, really, even. To an omnivore, every vegan looks like a preachy vegan. Well, in some cases, that's true. Well, that's the point. As a culture, we are far too comfortable with consuming animals. The idea that meat is cost-free is exactly what led us into this trap, delicious as it may be. We should feel embarrassed and uncomfortable that people are going gaga for a mass-manufactured fried chicken sandwich. This whole thing, the longer you're vegan, the more it seems like a very, very, very bizarre thing that we're doing to other animals. It becomes where you have to kind of sort of go, you have to sort of shake yourself in a way, because it's so bizarre. It's like sometimes you feel like you're an alien dropped on a planet and seeing this bizarre activity of animals being bred into existence, and either they're in a cramped, awful, torturous space, and they're being fed all these awful things that are and millions of tons of antibiotics and hormones to make them grow quicker, like with chickens. These broiler chickens, they grow so quick that they have heart attacks or their legs break. I mean, it's insane. If I was somebody from another planet and I came down here and saw what we were doing to 99.99% of the planet's population and enslaving tens of billions of hundreds of billions of these land animals and all of that, I don't know, I would get the hell out of there. And I think that is affecting everything that we do on this planet. And there's major violence, major violence going on, what we're doing to other animals. How could that not affect everything that's going on right now? Okay, so anyway, so his last thing he says, this is the last paragraph. Sorry this has taken so long, but I thought I wanted to pass this and I thought I'd just go through it. For the love of the planet, put down the sandwich, but if you won't do that, at least refrain from putting down the people who are trying to light a path to a livable future. The vegans are right. The vegans were always right. The least you can do is shower them with respect and our gratitude because they deserve it. So that's Fahad Maju. He's from he's a New York Times columnist. It's interesting. I hope that Fahad Manju, I hope that he goes vegan, because it seems like he has a lot of the ethical, he has the seeds of the ethical position that eventually, if you internalize, the ethical position, well and truly, it wouldn't matter if you're in a room with nothing to eat, you would never pick up an animal product and eat it, because you just wouldn't do that. So it's sort of like when you internalize the ethical position, there's no such thing basically as an ex-vegan. If you internalize the ethical position, you'll never not be vegan. It's like once you really internalize that it's wrong to be racist, you'll always hopefully be working on that daily, and you'll always reject racism when you see it. You can't just suddenly, I'm going to be anti-racist a few times a week and be, or suddenly say, I don't care, I'm not going to be an anti-racist anymore, I'm going to be a racist. I mean, that's the thing. It's important to internalize the ethical position. I invite you to check out my website, howtogovegan.org. It's a comprehensive vegan resource in podcast form. I enjoy making it, and I hope that you check it out because it'll help you internalize the ethical position. And if you want to find out about nutrition, there's actually a really good site. I don't endorse everything that's on that site, but nutritionfacts.org by Dr. Grieger. He does science-backed. They go through all the nutrition journals, all the science journals, all the medical journals, and they collate it all together and put it in short videos, and it's really, really informative. I'd been vegan for a few years, and I didn't realize about B12, how important B12 is for vegans, because all the B12 has been taken out of our food. You know, it's all industrialized. B12 is a microbe. It's taken off the vegetables. It's not in the water anymore. So you don't really get B12, and so you need to supplement, and you need to take about 2,500 units of B12 every week, units that is, and that's very simple. It's just over the counter B12. It's really cheap, and if that's the only, you know, and it's probably good to take omega-3s. And there's algae it's a plant-based algae, but you can find all this out on nutritionfacts.org. You know, if that's all you have to do is take it cheap over the counter, then it's way better than causing all the violence of animal exploitation. It's way better than filling your arteries full of cholesterol and making yourself diabetic, or they've said that a lot of cholesterol collects in the cranial arteries and leads to dementia. That's actually something that is not very well known, but there's evidence that it's leading to dementia and Alzheimer's, this animal products, the cholesterol in them and so forth. You know, and animal protein causes every time we ingest animal products, we're causing inflammation in our bodies. Animal protein is actually detrimental to our kidneys, and it's detrimental to our colon. It breaks down the kidneys. I mean, there's all this science-backed information about this, so it's important that we find that out. But the most important reason is because we don't have the right to use these sentient animals who are just like the dogs and cats whom we love. They have the same sentience, they have the same love of life, they do not want to die, they have likes and dislikes. Every single animal that's killed today, the 200 million plus land animals, the many, many more aquatic animals, they all loved life and did not want to die, and they died in the most horrific way, and their life was just torturous. You know, we don't need to do that. We want a planet of peace, and it starts with us. Peace is the way, basically, the way we live. If we want a planet that is a peaceful one, we have to start with us, right? It's that thing. So anyway, that's all I want to say. Please subscribe if you like the content. Please click the notifications bell, otherwise you don't receive any updates if I've dropped a video. And please hit the like button if you like the content. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals for Vega. Go vegan. Peace.